everyone, and welcome. My name is Lexy Locklear. I'm Lumbee, and I am Advance's National Program Associate. And I'm so excited that you're here to join us tonight for this conversation. With Election Day right around the corner, we wanted to just take a moment to highlight how Native leadership is making a real difference in communities across the country. Today, I am here with Megan Feeney, our Research and Data Manager at Advance, who's going to be sharing some key findings from our 2025 research and inspiring stories of Native leaders advancing solutions across the country. From expanding access to childcare in New Mexico to protecting families in Montana, we're going to explore a little bit about why local representation matters, how Native leaders are shaping policy, and the impact that this work has on all of us. So just a little bit of background on Advance before we get started in our conversation. Advanced Native Political Leadership, or ADVANCE for short, is the first and only national Native-led organization dedicated to building political power in Native communities. We take a holistic approach to this by creating an ecosystem that focuses on leadership recruitment and support, civic engagement, data and research, and national coordination. We believe that when Native peoples and communities have access to national networks, innovative tools for organizing, strong voter engagement strategies, and pathways to leadership, we strengthen the health and well-being of all of our communities. At Advance, we are committed to creating opportunities for leadership development, community connection, and visibility for Native leaders. We're working hard to build power through leadership representation so Native voices are heard at every level of decision-making in the country. So tonight we're going to get into a little bit of what the research and data part of that and how Megan is the research and data manager for that. So Megan is our, as I said, the research and data manager for Advance's research team. She builds on the foundation laid by ICT, working to create the most comprehensive data set of Indigenous candidates and elected officials at all levels of government. In 2024, Megan helped launch Advance's public opinion research program with the aim to improve our understanding of the political identities, values, and priorities of Native communities across the U.S. She also leads Advance's Native national endorsements programs and manages research partnerships with Native academics, journalists, and organizers. She loves creating data tools that support Native leaders and demonstrate the power of Native voters. Previously, Megan was a staff writer for Ballotpedia, the digital encyclopedia of American politics. In that role, she collected and analyzed data on state and local elections, helping hundreds of thousands of people access quality information on how to vote. Megan earned a PhD in philosophy from Rutgers University in 2019. And we are so glad and blessed that she is on our team and a part of our staff. Megan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hi, Lexi. It is so great to be chatting with you tonight. And hello to everyone listening. It's great to meet you. I'm Megan Feeney. You, she, her pronouns. And I'm just really excited to be sharing some hopeful stories. One of the most favorite parts of my job is that I'm constantly encountering stories that you might not be aware of if you don't live in like a particular state. I find constant examples of Native leaders who are passing really impactful policies that change for the better the daily lives of the people they serve. So before I dive in, I want to flag that this conversation is going to be a C4 conversation for any funders who happen to be listening. So we are going to be talking about some of our endorsements work and some of the candidates who are on the ballot tomorrow.
Thanks, Megan. So we'll get started with our questions. Jumping off, in 2024, we saw a record number of Native candidates who ran for office. At least 261 of these candidates ran for office across 25 states, with 65% of Native candidates winning their elections. Could you talk a little bit about how this wave of Native leadership is translating into tangible change that we can see? What have Native leaders accomplished over the past year that makes a difference in the day-to-day lives of the communities that they represent?
Yeah, thanks for this question. So, as you know very well, Lexi, at Advance, we like to say that when Native peoples lead, all communities thrive. Or in other words, when we elect Native leaders to office, They pass policies that benefit everybody. And I think that there is no better example of that this year than New Mexico. So, and by the way, I wrote a novel for this question, so please bear with me. It's going to be long because it's hard to pick examples and there's so many good ones. Okay, New Mexico. On Saturday, New Mexico became the first state in US history to enact a free universal childcare program. So regardless of your income, you can take part in the state's childcare assistance program. That's huge. We all know how expensive childcare is. It's now going to be like a little bit easier for families to balance working and raising kids. It's going to save folks a lot of money, estimated like $12,000 a year. And that's not to mention the kids, right? We know that when you invest in early childhood education and early childcare, that just lays a strong foundation for your entire life. Okay, I brought this up because one of the two sponsors of the bill that helps make this possible is a Native woman. Her name is Representative Doreen Wanda Johnson. She's Diné or Navajo, and she represents District 5 in the New Mexico State House. She's been in office quite a while. She was elected in 2014. And so she was one of the two sponsors of a bill that kind of got the money in place to make free universal childcare possible. And it's hard to oversell how big of a deal this is. Like it's the first program of its kind in US history and I just think it's a really good example of how when Native women get into office, they get stuff done and they get stuff done that benefits everybody. You know, it's a universal program. Okay, so part one of my novel, that's part one. Part two of my TED Talk, I wanted to shout out another big win in New Mexico this year, the turquoise alert system. So this is a kind of like an Amber Alert, and it's a really important step towards in the fight against the MMIP crisis. So now when a Native person goes missing in New Mexico, law enforcement has to share out an alert like on the news and on the highway signs and on social media. Um, the sponsors of this bill include three Native women. State Senator Angel Charlie, who is Laguna Pueblo, Diné, and Zuni Pueblo. She's also an alum of Advances Native Leadership Institute. Representative Michelle Pauline Abeta, who is Diné. She represents District 69 in the State House. And finally, Representative Charlotte Little, who is San Felipe Pueblo, representing District 68 in the State House. So this is also a huge win. And I want to mention that Representative Abeta and Senator Charlie were first elected in 2024. So this is their first term in the state legislature. Many, many hands and many, many years went into this bill and this success. But I think it's remarkable that they were a part of it during their first term in office. Native women, we'll be elect Native women, they get stuff done. Okay, last part of my novel, last part of my TED Talk. I really wanted to mention Montana. Montana had the Native caucus in Montana had an incredibly successful year. There's currently 12 members of the Native caucus in Montana, which is a really powerful bloc. Montana is actually tied with Oklahoma for having the most Native state legislators in office. So they accomplished a ton this year. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. They were a really important part of a successful push to maintain Medicaid expansion in Montana. So this is healthcare for everybody, right? If Medicaid was allowed to sunset, an estimated 54,000 to 74,000 people would have lost their health insurance. And that's according to the Montana Healthcare Foundation, right? So they were an important part of securing healthcare for tens of thousands of people in Montana. That's not all. That's not all they did. They also established Indigenous Peoples Day as a state recognized holiday. They extended the Montana Indian Child Welfare Act, and they defended treaty rights. So they blocked a bill that would have opened up deer and elk hunting on flathead lands in violation of treaty rights. And that's kind of like cutting it short a little bit. They had a really successful year, and it just shows they had like a critical mass of folks in office, and they were able to get a ton of stuff done. Okay, final shout out here. I just want to mention that this research, I didn't do it. I'm just relying on some fantastic journalism by Caden Foreman Webster at ICT and Montana Free Press. Um, so yeah, Native leaders have had a tremendous year, lots of successes at the state level.
Thank you, Megan. Those are just like a few facts or evidence of the work that Native peoples have been doing in the past year. But we know more than anyone, I think, that when these folks are not only just in these state positions, but even local elections, how important that change can be on a local level. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit more in the questions that we have. But um, tomorrow, Tuesday, November 4th, is election day in many states across the country. What do we know about the Native candidates who are running for office this year in 2025? What trends are you currently seeing?
Thanks, Lexi. So quick preface, you might be wondering, hey, do I have to vote tomorrow? There's a lot of tools out there that can help answer that question. I would recommend going to ballotready.org. If you go to their homepage, you can pop in your address and it will tell you if you have an election tomorrow, and you can research what is on your ballot. And we're going to pop that link into the comments. If you do have an election, don't forget to make a plan to vote. Just spend a second and think about how you're going to vote. Are you going to go to the polls or go to a drop box? And when you're going to do it. Okay, so we tracked Native candidates this year. We do this in partnership with ICT News. And I want to flag this data is updated as of the end of October. We found that at least 111 Native candidates are running for office this year. The vast majority of those candidates are on the local level, so 95% are at the local level. And that's just a matter of what elections are up for, are on the ballot this year. So Congress isn't up for election, and in the vast majority of states, you elect your state officials in even years. Big exception is if you happen to live in Virginia or New Jersey, you have to elect your governor and your state legislature tomorrow. But they're kind of the exception to the rule. So 95% of Indigenous candidates are running at the local level this year. If you zoom in on the local level, the breakdown looks like this. We've got 46% running for a school board position, 42 for a city or county legislature, 7% for a special district. And a special district, that's like if you have a board that oversees your hospital or your community college, that's a special district. 4% are running for mayor, and finally 2% are running for a position with a local party organization. And that's like a Democratic or a Republican Party committee. Um, okay, so mostly school board and city or county legislature. I think a lot of people might want to discount the local level. Like they think, hey, like the real action is in Congress and the presidency. But I think the truth is really the opposite. You can make a huge impact on people's lives by running for a local office. So, your school board members, these are the people who have power over the quality of education your kids get. Your city councilors, these are the people who have a lot of power over how much housing costs in your community. They can, accelerate affordable housing or make it harder to build new housing. Your mayor, they might have power over economic development and like how easy it is to open a business in your community. So the local level shouldn't be dismissed. And if you're interested in running for office, it's a really good place to get started. Okay, final thing I'll say is when you compare this year to 2023, I think the story is that Native leaders are holding strong or holding steady. The numbers were pretty comparable. So in 2023, we followed 104 Native candidates running for office across 19 states. And this year it was 111 across 16 states. So 104, 111, it's pretty similar. So I think in a very difficult political climate, Native leaders are like holding strong.
Thank you. Can you share a little bit about the demographic breakdown of those candidates this year? How does that compare to last year?
Yes, totally. So no surprise, Native women are leading the way yet again this year. Um, 59% of all the candidates we identified are cisgender women. Only 39% are cisgender men, and 2% are non-binary, two-spirit, or gender non-conforming. And that's in line with what we saw in 2024 and 2023. So I keep mentioning 2023. It's because we like to compare odd years and odd years and even years and even years. So that's kind of why I like skip over 2024. It's just kind of like a little bit because the offices are different, it's not quite comparable. But in 2023, the majority of Native candidates we identified were women again, and that trend continued. I was also really excited that 5% of the candidates we identified this year are LGBTQ plus, 5%. Uh, in 2023, we did not identify a single queer candidate running for office. So I think the reason is just we got a little bit better. Our research got a little bit better. And I think our reach at Advance is expanding. So I think what happened this year is LGBTQ candidates reached out to us to tell us they were running. And that's why we found more folks, which is exciting. And then last thing I'll say is about geography. The top states where Native candidates ran this year were pretty similar to what we saw in the past. Alaska is number one by a lot. So Alaska saw 39 candidates run for office this year. New Mexico and Oklahoma are tied for second at 14, and Washington is coming in third place at 12. And this was pretty similar to 2023. The order was Alaska, Washington, New Mexico, Oklahoma. So my takeaway here is just Alaska is special in this way and many other ways. It's unique. It's not unusual for me to find offices where 100% of the officials are Alaska Native. There are tons of school boards serving Alaska Native villages and communities. And so it's really common for the entire school board to be Alaska Native because of where it is and who it serves. So Alaska is pretty special in that way.
Thanks, Megan. Those are exciting statistics to hear. Um, so for some, election day is tomorrow, but for a lot of folks, election day has already happened. Can you tell us a little bit more about what election results have looked like so far this year? What have been some highlights or inspiring stories from your election tracking work so far?
Yeah, thanks for this. So some of the folks listening might be surprised to learn that the majority of Native candidates already had their elections this year, and that's because they are local candidates, and local elections happen throughout the year, not just in November. And there's good. So we already kind of know what the picture looks like to a large extent, and it's really positive. So 65% of the Native candidates this year who have appeared on the ballot won their elections. So that's a solid majority. And that's in line with what we saw in 2023 and 2024. So last year in 2024, 65% of Native candidates who ran won. And it was like almost the same in 2023, 64%. So I think that's really encouraging news for anyone who might be interested in exploring a run for office. It's exciting to see that result. And it's kind of remarkable how consistent it's been over the past 3 years. Um, Lastly, I want to tell a story about a story that inspired me from earlier in the year. This is the story of Michaela Madrid, who was one of our endorsed candidates. She ran for election in March, I think it was March, in the spring of this year. She is Lower Brule Sioux, and she ran for city council in Spearfish, South Dakota. She told a really inspiring story about her decision to run. Through her job, she was working to facilitate a tribal listening session for the city of Spearfish, South Dakota. And they were doing some strategic planning. And so she worked really hard to make this plan accountable to Native community members in the city. Like a lot of the suggestions that emerged from her session wound up making it into the plan that went to the city council. But 24 hours before the council was going to have this big meeting, they put it on the agenda to kind of take out parts of the plan. They were going to remove or heavily revise them. They removed all the sections on Native history and all the sections on like the Native community. They also wanted to take out sections on affordable housing, access to childcare, public transportation, renters protections, and more. So it was a big threat. And Michaela said that she and her friends organized really quickly to speak out at this meeting. And she said it was packed. The room was like standing room only. Lots of folks spoke out against it. And the council actually received the message and didn't move forward on changing the plan. Like they were, um, I think, kind of surprised and they saw the power of that room. And this experience is what inspired Michaela to run for office. And I think it's a story of her recognizing her own power and the power of her community. She also mentioned a lot of people asked her to run after that moment, and that's kind of a common theme we hear a lot, is that kind of what puts Native women over the edge is like being asked by their community members to run for office. Um, so sometimes it takes like somebody saying, hey, I think you'd be really good at this to make the difference. But yeah, I just want to take a minute to like celebrate her decision. It felt really powerful, especially given that like knowing that the council was the way it was, to make that decision to say like, hey, I'm gonna do a better job and I'm gonna try. Um, that was like one of my favorite highlights from this year.
That reminds me of a lot of conversations I've had with alumni who've been through our NLI training program, and they have the same sentiment of I would have never done this if someone didn't tell me that or recommend me to or tell me that they think I should be running. So um, that's really powerful when someone else notices your leadership potential and encourages you. Um, so that's a great story. Thank you for sharing. Um, So we know that you're going to be watching the election closely tomorrow, and Michelle also on her research team. But what elections on the ballot will y'all be following a little bit more closely? Why are those more important?
Yeah, I will say the one election I'm looking at very closely is what's going on in Gallup, New Mexico tomorrow. So for those who don't know, Gallup is in northwestern New Mexico. It's close to the Navajo Nation, the Hopi tribe, and Zuni Pueblo. And so Gallup is a Native majority town, Native American majority town, without representation on the city council or in the mayor's office. So it is overdue. And I think tomorrow that's going to change. There are at least 3 Native candidates running for office in Gallup tomorrow. I say at least because I discovered recently there is someone I didn't know about. So it's always possible there's someone else. There's someone else. So at least 3 candidates running in Gallup tomorrow. 2 of them are running for the mayor's office. So Tamaris Montano, who is Navajo and Anishinaabe, is running for mayor. She's a youth mentor who's coached over 600 young people in rugby and football at Gallup High School and at UNM. And she's also been the executive director of New Mexico's youth rugby organization, which was pretty cool. She strikes me as someone who understands that when you invest in young people, um, like an entire community can change. She she's also just deeply involved in like Rotary Club, the community pantry, and lots of other programs. She's running against another Native candidate, Lyndon Sozi, who's Dene. He is a jeweler and silversmith for over 3 decades. He's led a food drive in Gallup for over 20 years. And he also founded a nonprofit whose mission is to support young people who want to learn Navajo silversmithing. So it's kind of like a career pathway program that also like preserves cultural traditions. So these are the two candidates. There's also a third non-native candidate that I didn't research, but these two candidates are running for mayor. Um, and then finally, I want to shout out one of our endorsed candidates, Sierra Yazi Azamoah Tutu, is running for City Council District 2 in Gallup, and she's Dene. She's one of our endorsed candidates. She's a mom of three kids, a social worker for over 12 years. Her campaign is focusing on housing justice, mental health, access to clean water, and infrastructure, so like roads and sidewalks. Um, she wrote, I hope to be a voice in the local government for change towards serving those in need and away from historical perspectives of racism and exploitation. So, okay, so the reason I'm so paying so close attention to Gallup is because I think what's going to happen is they're going to go from zero Native representation to potentially two office holders in one election. I think that's really exciting and um, remarkable and like long overdue.
Megan. Um, we will be sure to make sure that everyone who is watching this, if you are signed up for our newsletter, you will be receiving a follow-up email after this with a follow or just a recap of the elections that we mentioned. So if you are watching this, make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter so you can get a closer detailed look of our recap after the election. Looking ahead to next year, Megan, what impact will Native candidates have on the national political landscape in 2026, do you think?
Yeah, so 2026 is already shaping up to be an enormous year for Native candidates. We're already off to a really strong start at Advance with our tracking. So we've identified 39 Native candidates running for office. When I think back to November of 2023, I don't think we were this far along with our tracking. It just seems like we're going to find a record number of folks again in 2026. There's also going to be some really high profile elections with Native candidates featuring or like starring. Um, you, the folks who are listening probably already know that Deb Haaland, who's Laguna Pueblo and Jemez Pueblo, is the front runner in the race for governor of New Mexico. If she wins, she's going to be the first Native governor in history. This is like one of many ceilings that she's broken. She was one of the first two Native women elected to Congress in 2018. She was the first Native U.S. cabinet secretary in history when she was Secretary of the Interior. And if I'm betting correctly, I bet she's going to be the first Native woman governor in history. That's the one everybody knows. You might also know that Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, who's White Earth Ojibwe, is running for Senate in Minnesota. If she wins, she's going to be the first Native woman U.S. Senator elected in history. And currently, she's the highest ranking Native woman serving in office, elected office. So that is a lot of firsts. Those are the two races that probably everybody already knows about. Another really high profile moment is going to be when former Congresswoman Mary Peltola decides what she's going to do next year. She's Yupik and she was the first Alaska Native congressperson ever elected in 2022. Last year, she lost her reelection by 2.4 percentage points, which is like really narrow, especially in a state like Alaska. And so everyone's kind of watching her. I didn't Google this. I hope she hasn't done something. I Google every day, but I could have missed it in the last couple hours. But um, Alaska has two elections next year that are really high profile, and everyone's kind of watching to see whether she declares for one or the other or neither. So there's going to be a governor's election And it's for an open seat, which means that the incumbent isn't running. So it's a big opportunity. There's also going to be like the US Senator election in Alaska. Um, with that one, like the incumbent is running, but so it might be a little more challenging. But on the other hand, this race is going to play a role in determining the balance of power in the Senate. So it doesn't get any more high profile than that. So I'm sure former Congresswoman Peltola is feeling some pressure to decide what she's going to do next year. Um, and I feel a little guilty for adding to this or just like contributing to this anticipation, but I think it's a really big decision and we're excited to see what happens.
You've talked a little bit about the Native candidates that are running in several races next year that will draw some national attention. But what elections next year are deeply important, but may not draw as much attention or might be flying a little bit under the radar?
Yeah, so I definitely want to mention a couple of elections that folks may not know about. Um, a story that I'm following pretty closely is what's happening in Arizona next year. We already have three Native candidates who declared that they're running for Congress and one who's running for a statewide office. And that's a really strong showing so far, and we're not even in 2026 yet. Um, so in Arizona's second congressional district, we have two Native candidates next year who are running against each other in the Democratic primary election. Jonathan Nez and Eric Deschini are competing in the primary. Nez is the former president of the Navajo Nation, and Deschini, who's also Navajo, is a former state rep, and he's worked in county government and Navajo Nation government before. So when I saw this, I was curious whether this has happened, like have Native candidates run against one another in a congressional primary election, or is this the first time? And it turns out that not only has it happened before, it's happened before a couple times that I know of. Mary Peltola, you probably people probably don't realize that Mary Peltola was actually running against three other Alaska Native candidates in the primary when she won in 2022. And similar things have happened in Oklahoma in 2022 and in other states. So it's kind of exciting to see like, hey, this is not necessarily like the first time this has happened, and hopefully it'll keep happening again and again. One thing I'll be looking at is whether having Native candidates together in a primary, whether that is exciting and motivating and what happens to turnout. Because sometimes, primaries don't always get as much attention, especially in a year like when the president isn't running. Okay. Last thing on Arizona, we're really excited that one of our endorsed candidates next year is Clara Pratt. She's Diné, and she's running for the Arizona Corporation Commission. Okay, so this is not a super sexy office. Like this is the statewide office that regulates utilities in Arizona, right? It sounds boring, but I swear to God, it's really important and powerful. It's important because it is the office that sets utility rates. So we know how expensive our utility bills are. This is the office that has power over setting the rates. And it also has power over how much renewable energy development happens in Arizona. So, when climate change it feels like climate change has maybe an even bigger impact in a state like Arizona than it may in other places, with temperatures rising and fire and drought. This is the office that kind of steers the future of renewable energy development in the state. So we're so excited that Pratt is running. She has both like professional experience and lived experience that's relevant here. She writes on her website that she didn't have access to utilities until she was in middle school. And it feels kind of especially powerful that she's running for an office that regulates utilities in Arizona. Um, She also founded Navajo Power, which is it's a public benefit corporation that develops clean energy projects on tribal lands. So it's going to be really close. The margin of victory for this office has been razor thin in the past. It was actually 1.2 percentage points in 2024 and 2022. So it's going to be a nail biter, and very competitive. And you might not know about it if you don't live in Arizona, but it's a really exciting one.
Thank you, Megan. Um, Sorry, y'all. I feel like I'm coming down with a cold. Um, what can listeners do to learn more about the Native candidates that we've talked a little bit more about tonight, but also others that we didn't mention? How can they learn more about those candidates running for office and support Advance's can tracking project?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I dropped a lot of names, and maybe folks are wondering, we're wanting to learn more. So there's a couple things you can do. First, we publish a newsletter called Native Power on the Ballot. And so we share out updates on Native candidates who are running for office throughout the year. Um, please sign up for that if you're interested. I think we're going to drop a link in the comments where you can do that. We also published a brand new report like a couple weeks ago that provides a comprehensive analysis of Native candidates who ran in 2024. There's also a list in that report if you're curious, like who's running in your state or who ran in your state last year. And then finally, a lot of our data is crowdsourced. Um, we do research ourselves, but it's really helpful to get tips from folks who might know somebody we don't know. And we make an effort to like share it back with the community through things like the newsletter and things like this conversation and the report. So it takes a lot of folks to make sure we're not leaving people out. So please let us know if you know of a cool candidate or an office holder. Let us know their names and make sure that we are as comprehensive as we can be.
Thanks, Megan. Like we always try and end these conversations with a little bit more personal questions for our guests. So I've had two questions for you. The first question is, what motivated you to cast your very first vote ever, and how did that experience shape the way you think about participating in elections today?
I was so deeply inspired by Obama in 2008. I was 17, so I couldn't vote for him, but I really wanted to. I did this project in high school where I like made a voter guide as a 17-year-old. Like I was so excited about Obama. But this is actually the story of how I didn't vote. The first election I was eligible to vote in was 2010. I was 19 years old. And I think back, I'm pretty sure I didn't vote. I was passionate, I was smart, I cared about voting. I just didn't know there was an election. I was like a kid, I was too busy like studying and maybe having a party. Voting did not enter my brain even a single time in 2010. And so the first time I voted was actually in 2012 for Obama by mail. And that was like, I don't know how old I was, but it was way too late to be starting. And like the lesson I take away from that is there are a lot of young people out there who are passionate and motivated and smart. They just need a little help. They need a little information about when elections are happening. They need a little nudge. Um, the other thing was I went to college in Pennsylvania. My first vote, I cast it by mail in the state of New York, which seems like a missed opportunity. Um, because Pennsylvania matters so much more.
Funny. Um, Lastly, do you have a favorite fall tradition, and have you done it yet? Do you have any plans soon?
Yeah, I love watching horror movies. I don't watch as many of them as some of our colleagues, as you know, Lexi. But I did watch quite a few in October. I saw Weapons, which was excellent. It was really funny and strangely funny and good. I saw the most recent Final Destination, um, also kind of strangely funny. And then I think the favorite one from this month is Hellraiser. It's so campy, and the special effects are really gross, but it's also terrifying. So I think it's a classic for a reason.
October is the month for horror camp, so it's acceptable. Thank you, Megan, for being our guest and for all your great research and detail that you take into your work at Advance. We appreciate it so much, and we're so thankful for your work and dedication to this job, and to all the reports that go out and the constant statistics and data that we're releasing. That's all because of the research teams that we want to give you your flowers and thank you once again for all that you do for us.
Thank you so much, Lexi, for all you do for us. Right back at you.
For our audience, if this conversation has inspired you to learn more about how you can be the change in your community, we would love to talk with you more about it. You can learn more about the Native Leadership Institute online at advancednativepl.org. You can learn more about our leadership trainings by checking out our website and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or X for more information about events that we have coming up. We do have two trainings that are upcoming next year, one in Alaska and one in Montana. So if y'all are Alaska and Montana folks, please be um, looking out for more information about those events. Please apply. If you have someone that you want to nominate to be a leader, please make sure that you're using our nomination form. We are always open for nominations. Um, Thank you again for joining us, and I want to wish everyone a very great night and just keep showing up for your community.